New York's Attorney General Letitia has now subpoenaed the former president and two of his children, Ivanka and Donald Jr. The subpoenas are part of a civil probe into the Trump Organization's business practices, but there are already reports that Ivanka and Donald Jr. will refuse to comply. BNC legal contributor and prosecutor Paul Henderson joins us now from the West Coast. And Paul, is the family now starting to become the family that cried wolf when it comes to subpoenas? I mean, we now know what the game plan is. It doesn't matter whether it's the January 6th committee, whether it's the Mueller probe. Delay, delay, delay is the name of the game. Will the courts sooner or later start to get tired of this?
I believe that they will, because each time that the subpoenas go out, there has to be a different evaluation from the courts and from a judicial officer about whether or not the targets are going to have to honor those subpoenas. And as the courts have repeatedly found ways to, or ruled in ways that have delayed investigations, inquiries, and direct attacks upon the family, I believe that that's starting to come to an end. Those stories and those narratives have gone out the window primarily because the majority of those subpoenas were denied in the past because of the presidential exceptions and the honor that was given to or granted to President. However, he's not president anymore. And the targets have shifted in a lot of these investigations to the surrounding families where the privilege does not and should not extend. So I think we are at the place now where the evaluations that are determining what is going to happen specifically to the children of Trump, to the senior administrators of Trump, are starting to become more and more relevant. And we're seeing that highly concentrated in specific areas like this case. And this is going to be one of the bellwether decisions about how the courts and how prosecutors are likely to proceed against not just Trump, but the administration and his family directly as well.
Paul, this is what's interesting about this, is that two of the children say, we're not going to testify. One of the children already has. Eric Trump was the executive vice president of the Trump company. He was subpoenaed to testify last year and did so. Why wouldn't the other two siblings have to testify as well? And what legal standing do they actually have?
I don't know what kind of excuses they will come up with, but I know that the focus from the prosecutors is not going to be changing and it's not going to shift. Just because they made excuses in the past and just because they used defenses in the past that have been individually evaluated by those separate courts doesn't mean that the courts will continue to evaluate or honor those same arguments that have been made in the past. And to the degree we are at the point where charges have been filed and subpoenas have been sent out, it becomes less and less likely or harder and harder to avoid those direct challenges and inquiries. And because we've already seen some individuals have testified in the past already, it does not make sense to have an excuse or to be able to affirm a defense when others are being challenged in the same way or being inquired of in the same way. That's where we are. And that's before we start unpacking the specifics of what's happening with the prosecutions and the inquiries in the very different jurisdictions, because it's not just across the board in specific jurisdictions. Most of the jurisdictions have been evaluated at a federal level because most of the charges have been federal. Now there are more, and there's a conflation of charges that are coming at a local level. So what we're seeing in jurisdictions like in New York, and we have a new Black district attorney there in Manhattan, or we have direct charges for fraud, direct charges for conspiracy that are coming out of this at the state level. And so those challenges is what I'm really looking at to see as the underpinning of where these cases are going to be headed. And I believe it's going to be much harder to avoid those prosecutions and much harder to avoid those subpoenas that are coming out at a state level, directly targeting not just the family, but the administration and the organization of Trump as well.
Before you go, we have a Black attorney general in New York, some saying that she would not continue on this case and not run for governor if she did not have a case against him. We have a Black DA right now in Manhattan. We have a Black prosecutor right now in Georgia. As someone who has been behind the scenes, peel back the curtain. Do they talk to each other? And if they do, are they comparing notes and saying, okay, this is what we're doing and this is what we've got?
Well, they would be foolish not to. It absolutely makes sense that you would pick up the phone to find out what subpoenas have been honored, what information do you have, here's my ongoing investigation, what is your ongoing investigation. And so the privilege of confidentiality is shared amongst prosecutors in terms of who has which jurisdiction and who's going to move forward, what's the status of your cases. And similarly, in the same way, when an individual is prosecuted, there is a conversation that takes place about whether or not other jurisdictions are going to come in and follow up on ancillary or related charges. So it's, there are long arm statutes that allow prosecutors to take up individual cases. And those conversations are actually common and encouraged, because otherwise it would be inefficient. Say, for instance, if you committed offenses in several jurisdictions or in several states, at some point, their decision needs to be made about who has the most likelihood of moving forward with the conviction, who's got the strongest case, who has the most recent case, and who has the better chance of moving forward with all of those things. So they can be all wrapped up collectively and or shared for ancillary or related crimes. So as we were just talking about what's happening in New York, and again, in those charges in Manhattan, at a local level in the state courts, the family itself is not being targeted, but there are senior folks in the Trump administration. But those convictions and or responses to the subpoenas could lead to information being shared, especially when it's under oath and someone has testified, in ancillary charges, both at the state level and at the federal level. And that's what we're seeing here. The underpinnings are coming apart.
And we should point out, by the way, Trump University, Trump Stakes, and other civil suits that were forced to be settled because of local prosecutors. BNC's legal contributor and prosecutor, Paul Henderson, joining us from the West Coast. Paul, as always, thank you very much for being with us.